sorry, just a quick clarification. Hi. Are we streaming?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Does everybody consent to the stream? Yeah. And presumably after, if you guys would like to retract your consent, you can just talk to the ad score and ask for it. Okay? Alright. Hi, mister.
The most important thing that most people care about is probably their own life and the life of the people that are surrounding them, their family, their neighbors, that they live in good, strong communities. But what people and consumers also care about is their global impact. So what I will bring to you in this speech is firstly the impact that this can have on a more local level, but then also on a broader, within the state government and also global level. Important to note is that we're not talking about products that you could exclusively buy from somewhere else. We're not talking about Austrians not buying bananas because there's no banana store in Austria, but we're talking about where alternatives, feasible alternatives in the country where you're at exist. So, on a community, or firstly, let's talk about what happens when people buy more locally. The market gets stronger. This means that producers in the local area have more consumers, they're more interesting to investors, they're more successful, they're able to employ more people. They're able to offer cheaper prices because oftentimes local products tend to be a bit more expensive. But what they also tend to be is of better quality. And this offers cheaper prices for products that are of better quality. Problems that we are seeing around the world are that smaller villages are dying out, or shops there are dying out. And this means that a lot of people are being put out of a job, which puts communities at a risk, because communities where people have various discrepancies within their income level and there is less equality, this means that these communities have higher problems of being a good inclusive community, which can in extreme cases even lead to crime, because people are oftentimes incited to steal from someone because they feel like someone unfairly has more money than them. But also, closer knit communities mean that someone, like when you're buying from your local shop instead of Amazon, this means you know the shopkeeper, you know your neighbors, you know you can talk to people when you need help. Huge problems that we face, especially in developed countries, but everywhere around the world, is that people are increasingly feeling isolated from their community and increasingly falling into depression. And especially, and then we go to more developing countries where people are unable to compete with the global market, and thus local stores are dying out because of that later. And when consumers are trying to include their local shops as much as possible, this is very much stopped. Then what happens on a governmental level? It means that local shops, like a local shopkeeper, is way more likely to be paying taxes. We know that Amazon has a lot of loopholes in not paying tax systems, which is incredibly important also for consumers, because they realize that the government is the one who's providing the welfare to most systems, in most countries and to most people. That means that obviously the government has way less of a burden of providing for all of these people. Then let's talk about the global dependency. What we see right now is an increasingly protectionist growing world. We see that Trump is having trade wars with China. We see that many countries around the world are trying to put tariffs on imports and exports. This means that if in your local country, your local industries are dying out because no one is buying these products, you're way more vulnerable to global shifts when suddenly trade wars start to happen. Consumers care about obviously having food on their table, and if there's no one in their country who is able to provide the food, when suddenly another country comes on and puts tariffs on them, it makes it incredibly expensive for them to buy that, they'll be having a problem. Then let's talk even broader. I'll take opening first. No, closing, sorry. Closing, do you have a QR?
No, no.
Okay. Later. Let's answer also the question of why should consumers do it? Well, they are in the unique position that they have an impact on these things. If a lot of consumers are buying a specific product, this product becomes more successful and cheaper and so on, and more accessible to them. So, of course, we also care about the government putting the money where it's supposed to be, but consumers have this unique ability to shift what the government is able to care about. Let's talk about even broader impacts. Well, let's talk about the environment. There are huge environmental impacts of shipments, transportation of by planes or by cars, by trains, and so on. And yes, it's also the responsibility of the government to say, okay, we want to lower our emissions, but the consumers are the ones who, when they change their demand, then this leads to policy change. And when the government sees that more demand is for something specific, then they are interested in providing policies that would be in the interest of most people opening.
You do realize that Coca-Cola, for example, exists in all local stores. This is something that you buy there, and you have all the benefits you're speaking.
That what? The what exists in?
Coca-Cola, in all local stores.
So, we're talking about, firstly, let's divide between goods and services, right? So if you buy Coca-Cola from your local store, you're already benefiting people on a local service level because you're buying from your local shopkeeper, which is on our side of the house. You're not fulfilling both of these roles because Coca-Cola is still an international company. So we say it's better if in your local store you buy something that is also locally produced, but consumers should at least try to do one of these things. So if they're unable, if there's no Coca-Cola produced in your country, then you should at least go to your local shopkeeper and buy it and not buy it off the internet. And also Coca-Cola is usually produced in every single country because it's more expensive to be produced than to be shipped. Than to be produced. So what we stand for is consumers increasingly aiming to benefit their local economies, the local economies that their quality of life depends upon, because their quality of life is made up of how good the people in their community are doing, and also the power to have global impacts to make their government less reliant on outside influences, and especially on a global scale, stop global warming.
I thank the speaker. I now welcome the leader of opposition.
Okay, so the first thing I want to clear out is this would make sense if the motion was we believe that country A should do this, that the people of country, but since this is happening on a global level, what happens actually when in every country people start to buy local? Well, then most of your benefits are not comparative, like taxes, for instance. These companies these big companies, they have manufacturing all over the world. They pay taxes, they pay benefits, they employ people, they invest into new facilities, so on. So most of this stuff exists in the status quo. But if we do this, if we simply push people to buy locally, then yes, there will be some new companies on a local level, but still there will be this massive loss of companies on an international trade level and so on. So not really comparative. Now I'll move to some other points. Let's say okay, I'm going to do the rebuttal and through that show what this actually stands on our side. So let's say lawfulness, like small companies are more likely to follow the law. This is not really so. Like, these large companies, they have a lot to lose, both in their reputation and both in massive fines. Like, the European Union fined Microsoft for billions and so on. So they have to be very careful. Next, they have better experts to keep an eye on these things and more control. But local companies, where they're functioning on a small individual level, if they are struggling, they have every incentive to break the law. And they have other benefits, like, yes, there is this small risk, but then they usually have local connections and so on, especially in the developing world. This is very, very strong. Next part about the environment. Like, yes, there are shipping costs and so on, and yes, this harms the environment, but overall, this will not benefit them, because these companies, and I'm going to give you a list of benefits that happen when we have a lot of these big companies. Like, first, they use the economy of scale, which means that when these sort of things happen in a larger amount, things are first more efficient, and secondly, cheaper for the companies, which means cheaper for the consumer. Next, they cooperate with each other. They have connections, relations, and so on, which makes cooperation easier, which makes the entire process more efficient. And simply, there is not this sort of synergy when you have like a lot of small companies, because they don't have the capacity to work together on that level. Next, about the developing world, like, let's move to that point. Like, yes, the situation is not ideal in the developing world, but the thing that is helping so many countries come out of poverty are these massive companies, which have their own problems, but they invest, they change the climate, they build factories, they bring new technologies that were not accessible, and they facilitate progress. That's how China has progressed so much. That's why Vietnam is progressing and so on. This is not ideal. They have their own problems, but they are better than the alternative, because the alternative is stagnation. And now I'll move to our next point, like worker rights. Like, in these sort of countries, it's a popular notion that they don't treat workers in an adequate way. And yes, in a way, and yes, this is true, but what would be the alternative? Like, these countries, they have some sort of obligation. Like, they fear for their own reputation. Now with the internet, it's easy to get information. So sometimes they face backlash from their massive consumer base. But we have all these small companies in the developed world. They don't have those incentives to respect the bare minimum. That's the reason why so many people in developing countries are working in these companies. Although they are bad, they're a lot better than unemployment. And the alternative for working for local jobs where they have no sorts of conditions, where they're treated awfully, and so on. Next thing, okay, this is our case. Like, we're going to talk about how this impacts the individual and how it impacts the broader economy. Let's move to our next argument. Like, on the control of quality of these products. See, with the internet, with the media, when one of these companies makes massive mistakes, it's known. Then when people get hurt as a consequence of their products, like when they're not quality and so on. So they put a lot of money into controlling the quality, because they know that if they make mistakes, it will be very bad for them. They have specialists, scientists and so on that work very hard on this, and this doesn't happen in the alternative, because a small local company, especially in the developing world, simply doesn't have the capacities to maintain this sort of control over their product. Okay, next, research. Like, in today's world, where everything is so innovative, where technology is at high level, it takes a lot of money to invest into improving a product. It takes a lot of money to make it more efficient. And local companies, where most local companies are small, they simply don't have this capacity to invest into research. And this goes to the environmental point. Like, further research and the efficiency of that helps the environment. Like, if we are stagnating, we're using old methods, that is the thing that is harming the environment. I'll take a POI. Yes.
Is Nike treating its people better, or a local company?
Okay, well, yes, they are treating, but look, this is the great point. Like, we all know Nike is treating their workers badly, and some people choose not to buy Nike, to buy an alternative. But we don't have that if there, that is what we have in the modern world. The alternative would be worse. The alternative would be that people in those countries would not have jobs, or would be working for local companies that we would never have heard of, and which we cannot influence in any way, that would treat their workers even worse. Yes, it's a popular notion that these corporations are awful, and in many ways they are. Like, we're not agreeing, but we are saying that the alternative is a lot worse, because what we bring are better products, cheaper products for all these reasons of efficiency that I said. Also better control over these countries and the products, better efficiency, which leads to a better environmental situation on the global scale. So all in all, are these corporations fantastic? Are they run by fantastic people? No, they're not. But they are a lot better than the alternative. 7 minutes.
I thank Leader of Opposition. I now welcome Deputy Prime Minister.
All of the impacts are based on the point that there will be no money and no international companies in our world, and everyone will pull out of all the countries where they're currently at. And here are some reasons why this will not happen, and why we also don't have to stand for that. One, because for some products there are no alternatives. This is not what we're debating. We're debating mostly about, for example, food, shoes, clothing, meaning that there are alternatives for them. Secondly, a locally produced market doesn't mean that there is no investors behind these markets. It means that these products are produced in my country and I'm buying from that product. It means that when I'm in my village X, that I'm not driving to the city to buy from Adidas, but that I'm going to my local shop to buy some shoes. That is the difference. What that means is that actually international actors, or like bigger companies, will have an interest in these markets because they're stronger. Because if all villagers from village X don't go to the city to buy the product, that means that there is an interest in buying the product locally, meaning that they will have an interest into making some profit there, meaning that investments can also happen. Closing.
Right, so Nike doesn't have this entire company in India, it just has a factory that makes shoes, and that employs thousands of people. If that factory moves away, what are those thousands of people going to do?
Okay, if Nike produces in India, okay, if that factory moves away, one, if everyone buys locally from all Indian, like if everyone buys in India buys locally from Indian produced shops, shoes, we don't think that, first of all, Nike will move away completely. Like, Indian people could theoretically still buy Nike shoes because they're produced in their country. But secondly, we don't think that Nike won't have an interest in still having an impact on the shoe market if that is what they're doing. We think what we're more talking about is local markets what we're more talking about is when there is an alternative. We think that, secondly, if in your village there is simply no one who is producing shoes, and this is why Nike will not move away, because there's always going to be some interested people having shoes, and some people, some areas just won't have that many shoe producers, you should buy them from someone who is from your area, meaning that you're not going to a big outlet, etc., but from people who are actually providing the service of finding the perfect shoe for you. Look, I think we have to define the divide between services and goods, because we think what happens when people buy more goods locally is that these become more valuable. What we also defend and what we think is inherently true is that incentives of governments, incentives of companies, all rely on consumers, or to a large extent rely on consumers, meaning that when, for example, in Austria, Austria has the biggest organic meat production in the world. 3/4 of Austrians buy organic, locally produced meat. In comparison to other countries, this meat is also relatively cheap, meaning that it's very accessible. What also happened is the government decided to also heavily subsidize this area because a lot of people were interested in these markets. So we think that consumers should do this because they're in a unique position to vote basically with their wallet. Alright, now it gives you a few reasons why this market, why these local markets will become stronger and why it is interested of consumers too. She tells you that first of all, it will be interesting to invest. Meaning, if I have a shop in a village in India or somewhere and I'm selling groceries, people will have an interest of selling to that person. Meaning that they will be interested also to getting to that shop, getting to those people. Because if there's a behavioral change in consumers, it means there has to follow also a wider range of change because they are forced to. As long what they're basically defending is status quo where there is no behavioral change and therefore nothing happens. We think that the worst impacts, the worst what can happen is that some big companies will make losses. This is what Nani tells you, that actually we are not that much profiting from these companies, meaning that probably Nike being in India, providing them with very, very low-paying, horrible jobs compared to maybe the future alternative of having much more sustainable, much more sustainable jobs from people you know who are from the community, from who will care about how much they pay you, is a much better alternative for these people and also the employees because it isn't based on exploitation. This is our best case. This is our best case in that scenario. But also in Europe, also in Europe, look, it's not true that we're so much profiting from Amazon and Starbucks and all of these shops being in Europe. The European Union might be able to sue some companies, but the truth is we're losing billions of euros every year to these companies. Austria is struggling, and especially singular countries. For example, Austria actually has high tax stuff.
You do realize that people in India choose to work in Nike, meaning that probably conditions in local companies are much worse than in Nike.
Okay, look. We don't think this is only a debate about India and Nike. We think that this is part of the debate, but we think that it has a much larger impact. If all consumers change their behavior to buy from local and products and services, we think this is an impact they are underestimating of how big this can be. That this can actually change the economic landscape to one where people actually can find jobs in their local areas again. The reason why there is no one buying, the reason why there's so many people working in Nike is because we thought that our local shoe store was not cool enough and it's cooler to buy from Nike, meaning our behavioral change produced Nike now producing in India on a exploitative basis, meaning that if we change our behavior, this is when also this can happen. But also, because we can vote with our wallet, because consumers are in a unique position to do so, and because not everyone was interested in all products, but we will just shift where the focus is, vote OG.
I thank Deputy Prime Minister and I welcome Deputy Leader of Opposition.
comparison in this debate, most of these companies would probably still exist. The products of most of these companies would still exist in pretty much every country. What is the comparative? The comparative is several reasons for that. Firstly, because they're pretty much ever going to be cheaper, because of economy of scale my partner gave you. Secondly, they're perceived as better. Even if they're not better, they're perceived as better. They have much bigger influence and stuff like that. Thirdly, these are like status symbols in this social situation, meaning that in pretty much majority of countries, these products are still going the same and some people are going to buy them. What is the comparative? The comparative is they probably are not going to build the factories for these products in this sort of situation. This is not stores, because majority of these companies like Nike doesn't have pretty much, Nike has only, for example, capital city stores and stuff like that. In also other situations, they just sell it in some other stores, which are, in majority of cases, you don't know who owns it. Does it owned by local company or does it owned by some strangers? But what like Coca-Cola doesn't have these stores, never. They always sell these products from all other retailers. This is the comparative. They're much less likely. If they don't realize that they don't have enough base of consumers, they're probably still gonna ship these products, but they're not gonna build factories which can actually give a jobs to a lot of people, give money to a lot of people. This is something that we are speaking about. This is what I asked in my POI for India, because in the majority of cases, people in India, people in Vietnam choose to work for Nike and for like all other these companies, because these companies are giving them better conditions. Not yet. These companies are giving them better conditions than all other companies that they could find on local level. Like you had companies that tried to be on local level, but they couldn't give them not yet. They couldn't give them these good conditions. This is why they choose them. This is not something that anybody forced them. This is something that happened. So furthermore, what they are giving to us, just to find, like environmental impact. Like pretty much the impacts of shipment exist in both sides of the house. Just like they're probably going to be higher on their side of the house because they're not going to have much bigger shipment when they don't have factory like Coca-Cola has in Serbia. In pretty much like every country that they have a great base of consumers. Yeah, they have their factory in Serbia to produce Coca-Cola. This is something where shipments are becoming much larger, meaning that environmental things are going to get much larger. Secondly, they speak about globally dependency of a trade war. This is something that happens now and pretty much nowhere, but I don't think why this affects this badly, because you're still gonna have the influence. You still are buying resources to produce your products, even if you are creating that. The prices of all other resources are still affecting the prices of products, like prices of oil and stuff like that. This still affects you, even though when you produce it by yourself. Secondly, they speak about organic meat in Austria. I think this is extremely uncomparative, because as they give that example, they're the monopoly in this country, and this is something. Yeah, this is something that then is uncomparative, because probably in both sides of the house you are gonna buy these products. This is something that you don't create any change. Yeah, we as a government in pretty much every country we support our production, but this is not something that you as a consumer need to do. So what is the comparative in this debate? I'll take closing before that.
So if it's true, let's assume you're right, and people still buy Coca-Cola, would you rather they buy it from a locally owned store where the profits are going back into their community, or buy it from a Starbucks cafe where the profits go to the guy on Starbucks?
Yeah, you probably. If you want to buy it from Starbucks cafe, you probably are going to buy it anyway. This is status symbol I already tell you about. The comparative in this debate is you pretty much are never going to choose your retail store from which is it locally owned or globally owned. We speak about buying products that are local or global. So meaning that you are buying some Fuse Coke or something like that in comparative to Coca-Cola, which is created in your country. First, the impacts on you as an individual when you choose to buy that. They're speaking about like they are going to create economy of scale. These products are going to tend to be better. They tend to be lower prices and stuff like that. What they don't say is that you're never going to be as cheap and as quality as Coca-Cola, as Nike, as anything like that. Why? Because like they're having global economy of scale. They're producing like hundreds, thousands of times more than you. Meaning that they're much easier to actually negotiate with all other companies that are providing them resources in comparative to you, meaning that they're always going to have cheaper and better products and better status symbols for you as a person. Secondly, they're much more likely, with my partner speak, they're much more likely to you as a worker give a better condition, because when you are a small entrepreneur, you're always intent to create just the greatest profit for you. This is something that you just get extract costs and just take how much you earn. The problem with bigger companies, they have much greater reputation that can harm them much globally if you find out that they did some shitty stuff. This is the comparative. This is where these companies are never going to do this sort of things. Meaning that Nike still exists in India because Nike has better conditions in India than pretty much every other company in India. Yeah, I'll take opening now.
Okay. They're giving you all kinds of reasons why consumers don't have a behavior change right now. This is a debate whether they should have a behavior change, not whether they won't.
Yeah, of course. A lot of consumers, yeah, this is believed that a lot of consumers should change. But this does not mean that every person is gonna change. The presumption of this debate that need for, like, we cannot rationally assume that Coca-Cola is stopped to exist in all other countries. This is not something that is going to happen. Coca-Cola still are going to exist in all these sort of situations. So, what is the comparative in this debate? The comparative is that when you buy from the global company, you still have majority of benefits, meaning that they need to pay taxes in your country, and they need to pay taxes like pretty much more. They need to be environmentally safe because they respond on a global level. They can be called out on a global level, meaning that they need to invest more in your local environment in order to have a good perception in growth. This is something that they're getting much greater taxes for your country. They're the only ones know that they're the only ones who can actually build some infrastructure or like some roads to their company. They can build facility. You as a local company can never create something that big. You can just sell your product. The comparative is they can build something that is going to create and that is going to stay in your community, in your society for a long term. This is something that you're never going to get if you choose not to buy their product, because they're going to be less likely to be like friendly to your society. And secondly, they're always going to, for the consumers, these products are always going to be cheaper and always going to be better. So proud to oppose.
Alright, I think opening half now, so opening half number.
Okay, so we're looking to address what's been largely missing in top half, which is addressing the part of this motion that says you should also try and buy from local services. We think that goods are a huge part of this debate, but we're actually going to bring the services bit in and answer the question we've consistently gotten for opening opposition about what about the things that you just have to buy, that just have to be supplied internationally, or have to be created internationally, right? So this case is going to deal with that briefly. Then we're going to talk to you about a very thorough list of the impacts of why multinational dominance of multinational corporations is a bad thing for both local communities and the world as a whole. We're going to flesh in all the analytical gaps from OG on these points. And then we're going to explain to you why market dominance is mitigated, or multinational dominance is mitigated, and these companies are put under pressure to have positive change, but also that local companies can flourish to some extent. Okay, so, on goods and services. I think what's missing from the top half of this debate is remembering that a local shop that is supplying like the amenities that you need for day-to-day life, like food, like cleaning products, etc., or a pharmacy, even in instances where they are selling goods which are produced internationally, is still a local business, right? And this motion doesn't say that consumers always have to buy things that are produced locally or services which are provided locally. They just have to do so, strive to do so wherever it is possible for them. What this means for opening opposition is that when they say we're really low impact because we're only talking about food, and more on that later because it's not actually that low impact, and even if it is, we're still winning the debate, right? What they fail to realise is that all the analysis we're going to bring you on how the lives of workers improves locally also applies in instances where people have to buy these goods, right? Because when you own a shop, you employ front of house staff.
You employ accountants. You employ buyers to buy the goods within your thing and choose them. You employ like very highly trained staff like pharmacists. And you treat them in a markedly different way than you would if you were a multinational company, right? So even if there are still some profits going to multinational companies, there are now more profits going to communities. And we then answered a critical question that was not answered in the top half of this debate. Let's fill in some of the analysis as to why multinational dominance is bad that OG doesn't provide us with, right? So just to come back to this, oh, you're low impact thing, insofar as all of the bad things that multinational companies do and the impact that has on the world and local communities is directly proportional to how many goods people are buying from these things because they happen in the production process. We think that even if we can prove to you that there's like a 10% reduction in profits for these companies, we've probably won this debate once we deal with their thing about jobs in the developing world, which we'll get to in a second, right, at the end of the speech. So the first thing is on ethics, right? This wasn't mentioned at all by opening government. There are two major ethical problems with multinational companies. First of all, in the developing world, they use child labour and massively unethical and unsafe labour practices and laws whereby people end up actually getting incredibly hurt during the production process. Secondly, at a local level, in developed countries, they have unethical employment practices whereby they pay wages below the living wage and also give things like 0-hour contracts and a lot of job instability to local workers, right? Secondly, on the environment, OG mentioned shipment and the harms of CO2 from shipment, but there are actually significantly more harms that apply across the board, right? The production processes employed by these companies in the local environments of developing countries where they make their goods are often massively detrimental to the local environment, right? So, like in gene bleaching, like chemicals, that can massively cause massive harms to like local communities. Pesticides can cause massive harm to water supplies and cause like blooms to grow and deprive like local biodiversity and create pollution in the local environment, right? Secondly, though, there's a lower quality of goods from these kinds of companies because that's how they make them so cheap. So if you buy clothes from Primark or any other kind of low-cost retailer like on the internet, etc., we think that what happens is that these clothes break more quickly and goods in general break more quickly, and therefore consumers have a greater need to replace these goods more frequently, which means that there is net more consumption, right? Thirdly, though, we think that these companies promote consumption and advertise and like a capitalistic lifestyle based around fashion and glamour and diversity that these people buy into, even though they don't always necessarily have the money to do so, which is actually not necessary for people to live fulfilling lives. So they actively promote consumption, they promote excessive consumption. Thirdly, on improving community, right? So OG say that you employ more people, and that's their major mechanism by which you improve community. But the problem is that in both worlds, a similar amount of goods and services are required of people. So it's not necessarily so much about, you might employ slightly more people, but it's more about what happens to the money that is made by those businesses and what conditions those people live under. So we've already dealt with the conditions. Let's talk about what happens to the money, right? So when the money goes into the pockets of multinational corporations, they don't have any particular interest or connection to that local community. When it goes to a local business owner, a number of things happen. First of all, that person might donate to local schools and hospitals because their child and their family and their friends all live in this town and they care about quality of life there. Second of all, they might donate to local charities and local community groups which they care about and improve that community. Third of all, their general wealth, and like they may say if they build a large house, right, they're going to employ local builders and they're going to increase the value of property in that area and generally make it a nicer area, right? We think that there are a number of reasons why local business owners improve those areas. I'll briefly take top half.
Okay. You do realize that local companies do have incentives to do the same, just have worse technology and has smaller reputation to protect.
No, multinational companies absolutely had no incentive to do the same. You had an entire 14 minutes to prove that to us, and you simply didn't. We've given you the opposing argument, right? And it's within their interest to be as cheap as possible, which leads us on to our next point. Multinational dominance occurs through two major mechanisms. First of all, economies of scale. Once you get a significant enough market share, you're able to build a factory and you can get much more output out of that factory when you have more consumers, and therefore your pricing is more efficient. Secondly, you're able to absorb losses and therefore undercut other companies by through the accumulated capital you've had from a history of market dominance. What this means is that you can outprice local competitors and drive them out of business and then subsequently raise your prices, which is how your undercutting mechanism works in a long-term profit-making mechanism, right? We think that the reason why you can't tackle this multinational dominance with regulation is because something always falls between the cracks and you can't account for anything. Most of the mechanisms you would use, like creating like a price floor,
people less, and you let them make individual choices to help local businesses because they care, and you're able to take things into account more, right? We think that you're less able to undercut people when people are making choices based on more than just price, and therefore you tackle multinational dominance. We beg you to propose.
I'm not hearing well. I don't hear you. If you have any
Alright, I thank the speaker, and now welcome member of opposition.
Madam Chair, I think this debate so far has missed a credible amount of nuance and also a credible lack of mechanisms of how the economy actually works and how things are going to change. What we're going to prove to you in closing opposition today is very simple. We're going to give a more realistic description of how developing countries actually develop from agricultural to the services sector, while those are the ones that are actually screwed over at the point where you no longer have companies investing in them, and also why it's also worse for poor people in Western countries at the point where prices go up. But first of all, let's give us a fair idea of the comparative, right? Because I don't think anyone really engaged with what is the status quo versus the point if we believe that consumers would more radically start buying other products. Because I think in status quo, there is already some sort of a shift of awareness in the West. That is to say, there is already some trend going on where consumers are more aware, for instance, of the rights of workers in Bangladesh, right? Companies like H&M and Levi's have already been forced to better their production chains because of media scrutinizing them and people in the public criticizing them for their behavior. Therefore, the comparative is not multinationals screwing people over massively versus a great local company. The comparative is a somewhat slower change of multinational dominance versus a more radical change because now people faster will start buying local products. I don't necessarily hear from them why multinational companies' harms are so bad as compared to when we are going to bring you why those multinational companies are necessary for industries to come up in the first place, right? So if we can prove to you these countries will never move beyond agricultural or industrial service sector to a service sector, and I think that harm is necessarily greater than the harm that they have because we are already moving towards the outcomes that they are trying to defend. Okay, so let's first of all tackle one point on climate change, because I think both government teams claim that climate change and pollution is very bad. We agree on that, however, I think it's a massive problem, and I don't think that this is necessarily the thing that tackles it, because one of the major reasons of climate change is, for instance, meat production, right? This causes a massive amount of climate change because of the meat and all the things that we consume, use so much pollution to be produced, use so much water, and so on. So I think rather changing those kind of things, making people go on less flights, those are things that have the greatest proportional effect, not necessarily just shipping a few products to another country, right? And also, a few more direct points of contention with closing government. Because they say that ethics in multinational companies are quite bad. We agree, but I think on the comparative, I think an Indian business owner cares even less about ethics than a Western company that is scrutinized by Western media and which is going to be charged with investigative journalists who want to scrutinize them and point this out because the Western public is more ingrained in human rights, has for hundreds of years developed human rights, where first developing countries where human rights in general is a foreign concept which local owners don't really care about, right? So I think on their side, it's not necessarily going to be any better, right? Then they say local businesses care about charities. Well, I think that most companies or countries where they talk about are mostly developing countries. I think at the point where you make just enough profit to make a living, you're not going to spend money on a charity to build a school because then you can't have anything to eat anymore, right? So I don't think these people are really going to spend so much money in the community. Okay, so first of all, the first point of constructive. Namely, why it's going to hit developing countries hard, and specifically in terms of moving on towards a more varied type of economy. What is the problem? You basically have three types of development in economics, right? You start off usually agricultural society, right? Then you move on to more industrial production, then we move on to services, right? So agriculture will be a country like Sierra Leone, which is very dependent on the export of specifically diamonds and gold. Then you have industrial countries like China and upcoming countries like Indonesia. Then you have services countries where services are the major thing, like the US and Europe. What's the problem? At the point where you want to buy local products, you do need an internal market, and you do need to be able to produce all these things in your own country, right? So at the point where people say we start making local products, then if I want to buy clothes, I already need to have a clothes factory in my country. If I want good services, I need people that are educated and have the intellectual knowledge how to make these things. Therefore, this is also where crucially multinational companies come in. Because what do? They do two fundamental things which developing countries wouldn't be able to do by themselves. First of all, they bring the funding that's necessary to ever meet the threshold to invest, for instance, in a large company. When Apple comes to build a factory in China that costs millions and millions of euros, no local owner would be able to have that money to invest in the company in the first place, whereas a multinational company from another country, because they already have more profit, because they are on a larger scale, have the money to invest in those countries. So on the comparative, we're going to have less startups in the first place and less industry coming up because countries have never had the meet the threshold to start a company in the first place. But secondly, this has never been mentioned in this debate so far, it is the expertise, right? Many Western countries have patents which they by international law own. That means it's very difficult for countries specifically where education is worse, where you don't have as good universities or knowledge, or a lower educated workforce, to ever come up with the same technology. How do you make an iPhone? Apple already has this knowledge. It's very unlikely that Sierra Leone is going to come up with how to make that product itself without having the technology and the people from Apple coming in and building a factory for them. That doesn't mean that we say they should always be owned by Apple, but if they ever want to move on from Apple to that stage, Apple first has to build a company, first has to employ people there, and therefore people, when they got, and how does this work? At the point where people have a job, they can send their kids to school, those kids can then learn, they can go to university, and in a few generations, they themselves can develop that technology, right? But if they never have a job, if they always stay working in this local store that they talk about, right? What does this look like? It's people in Sierra Leone, in Nicaragua, selling some bananas, having a local store where they sell, I don't know, a few local clothes. I think those will always stay small companies because the market is so local. And then maybe that's good for the environment, maybe that's good for the local community, but it never develops beyond that because the market is so small that they will never reach enough consumption, never reach enough profit to build that small store into a big factory, or to build that into a new university where new knowledge is going to arise. So it means companies always stay within that same cycle and never basically move beyond that. That also means that they will remain being exploited by multinational companies that do have certain products. Because this is also the second point where extension comes in. That is to say, a lot of countries don't have enough of an internal market to sustain this, right? Because in order to say you can produce products or sell products locally, you do need to have people that are able to buy those products. What's the problem? That many countries are dependent on, for instance, one single product. That is Nicaragua exporting bananas, it is Sierra Leone exporting gold, or this kind of things. Okay, I'll take
If there's no phones produced in your country, that's not part of the debate. It's about empowering existing local economies that could be there, like agriculture,
I think many people's quality of life improves to the point where they have new technology. I think people like to watch movies. I think people like to go to university. I think it's very empowering to people. That's the point where people always stay around in their local store. Maybe it's very fun selling bananas, but the next generation will be doing the same thing, right? If they ever want to move beyond that, then you need to have an industry, you need to have people to have money to invest in education and move on, right? And also, this is where the point of the internal market comes in. Because if you don't have an internal market and you only have one product, then there's a big problem. Because open government says, well, some countries will still be selling products to other countries which don't have bananas, for instance, right? What's the problem? If there are countries, some countries do have many different things, some countries only have one thing. That means Nicaragua only has bananas, will get a very negative trade balance because they still have to import products from other countries. They still have to import expensive technology from the United States. They still have to import clothes from China, but they don't, the only thing they can sell is bananas, right? So if the economy doesn't move beyond the agricultural sector, they will have a very negative trade balance because they always import things which are way more expensive than the thing that they are exporting. So they have to move to the industry, they have to move to the service sector to ever have a positive trade balance where people don't stay in poverty and don't go get worse and worse. For those reasons, very proud to oppose.
Alright, I thank the speaker and I'm like opening up and tell you a couple of things. They tell you, first of all, that you get better goods when you buy from multinational corporations and you don't buy from local goods. They tell you that multinational corporations have more incentives to treat workers well and have ethical and fair practices. I'm going to deal with both of those. Firstly, I'm having better goods, because they have economies of scale and therefore others will compare better goods for a cheap price, and that's good for consumers. I'm not sure that's true, because Raquel explains to you that when people don't buy locally, when they buy the cheapest goods, they buy from companies with a huge market share, and that market share then grows. And when they have market dominance, and they're able to price other consumers out for other new business out for a short amount of time, eventually they can actually just raise their prices or rely on things like status symbol or the fact that it's the good that you're used to and that you've been buying for years, so even if the price raises a little bit, you're still going to buy it. They can rely on that then, therefore, to make sure that actually, in the long run, their goods probably aren't of better quality because of the fact people are going to buy them anyway and they know they can price competitors out. And they're probably not cheaper because eventually they're profit-making machines and they want to make more money. So I'm not entirely sure. They don't give you mechanisms exactly beyond a kind of vague mention of economies of scale why exactly those goods would be cheaper. It can give you analytical reasons why, in the long term, they're actually going to be more expensive, and secondly, why they're not going to be of good quality because they're not relying on good quality to sell their goods. They're relying on cheapness and the fact that it's readily available, the fact that it's a status symbol. There's a number of reasons you buy them other than the fact they're good quality. Actually, the goods that you get from local businesses here are likely to be of better quality and to last longer. This is good. First of all, in the sense, we'll talk later about profits in communities, but when it's better quality, also means you buy less of them. And from an ethical standpoint, if clothes last longer, that you get all of the impacts that, oh, do you want to talk about the environment and the fact that you're not treating workers as badly, and that's better too. Secondly, they tell you that multinational corporations give people a job and they have incentives to treat workers well. First of all, on incentives. They say that incentive is a global reputation for whether or not you treat workers well. I think for that to be true, people would currently have to be boycotting Nike for their terrible practices in places like Indonesia, or they'd have to be boycotting Primark or Pennies for the fact that their factory burned down and killed 200 workers a couple of years ago. That's not currently happening. So the incentive they talk about, where people actually boycott these companies, or that these companies have an incentive for, doesn't exist in the real world, and as a result, that point cannot stand. I think in reality, the incentive to treat workers better comes from local businesses. There's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, like if you are the owner of a local business and you live there locally and you treat the people that you work badly, you literally know those people, you meet them every day, you're going to be shunned in your community if you're the kind of person who won't let your pregnant neighbour sit down for a break. And you're going to be treated badly in your community if you treat the people that you know very well. You're not a faceless person who goes home, who actually lives in a different country making those decisions. You're not a manager in a multinational company who I'm really, really sorry, but it's not my decision. It is your decision. People will shame you if you treat your workers badly. So that's an incentive that we have on our side of tests, they don't have on theirs. But also, I think you're not as focused on just churning out as many goods as possible. You're more focused on high quality goods. You want your workers to be in good condition. You want them to be enjoying their job, and you want them to actually be doing the job to the best quality rather than just getting as many products off the line as possible. That's a better incentive. And you're less likely to build cramped factories and things like that because of the fact that you know that local people would enjoy it. And then they say that, look, at least multinational corporations give people a job that wouldn't exist otherwise. I contest that claim that those jobs wouldn't exist otherwise. The reason that most people, a large number of people in developing countries, work in these kind of jobs, these governments have made an easy choice. They have made a choice that is good for them and bad for their citizens. So when multinational corporations come to them and say, we will invest in your country and build a factory and give you lots of jobs, governments take that deal and then they don't impose regulations and they don't impose high corporate tax rates and they don't impose good workers' rights in that company, because they get to say they have legitimacy. They get to announce this big deal of investment. They get to announce they're providing lots of local jobs in the area. And they don't actually think about the people on the ground. Or it is good for certain people who can get jobs of expertise in those areas, but it's not good for people on the ground who are disenfranchised, maybe can't vote or aren't given as much of a share of the vote in certain countries. But people and those developing workers are still exploited. But if that FDI didn't exist because of multinational, because people in those countries are buying locally and other places are buying locally, and those multinational corporations didn't have as much power, didn't have as much international clout, and people weren't willing as much to buy from them, we think first of all we get a better incentive on our side for them to treat workers better in those countries, because when people are not buying from them now for ethical reasons, when people, if consumers stop doing this, they'll talk about the ethical reasons why. And one of those reasons will be that you treat your workers badly, therefore I'll have to buy from a local company that won't. The incentives of multinational corporations changes a little bit, because they say, great, suddenly we're losing customers because people want to buy from local consumers that treat their workers well. We should treat our workers a little bit better. And maybe we don't change everything, but I still think if their analysis is even somewhat true that companies protecting their reputation, then even outside house, they protect their reputation more because they can't rely on the stuff I talked about earlier, like market dominance, like status quo, like having low prices, like being readily available all over the world. But I think also when companies aren't powerful and can't force governments as much to kneel to their wishes when they're providing foreign direct investment, then you have to stimulate the local economy in other ways that maybe take a little bit longer and are more difficult and aren't as easy as announcing a big investment from someone like Amazon or Apple or Nike. It's not that people in those countries don't buy goods, it's that currently they probably are buying goods that produce locally, but the factories that exist in the country aren't producing goods that are for them. They're producing iPhones that are bought in the West, they're producing Nike runners that are consumed in the West, they aren't consuming goods that are for them. So they feel very alienated from that labour because they're producing something that goes constantly away. Like they're happier when they're producing something for their local community and they feel like they're giving back to the people around them by providing them with essential services they'll use. But it's also better for that economy in the way Raquel tells you where the profits end up in communities. And this is true in the developing and the developed world, whether it's people buying from a local cafe in a city like London instead of from a Starbucks, or whether it's people able to buy from businesses in the developed world as well. Because when that money is spent in the community rather than spent on profit, the profits go back to the community. That's incredibly important because those people not just give to charities, but also spend their money every day in shops that spend in shops and that wealth goes back to the community, which means that local communities develop it further. All the profits are going to one person. So globally, there's a better redistribution of wealth when that happens. Closing opposition say, look, that actually you can develop homespun industries because you need the money and the expertise the foreign direct investments provide. And they say, look, you get enough money, you can send your kids to school, and eventually they can set up their own business. Firstly, I would say that these companies don't pay workers enough that they actually can send their kids, maybe to school, but not to college to get the kind of expertise or the capital they would need to set up their own business. But secondly, in their world, setting up your own business is much more difficult because of the market dominance Raquel talked about. So all the impacts of it, needing to have Apple in your country to develop kind of computer expertise doesn't happen because the people who have experts, it's not like they're setting up the technicians in Apple. All of those exist in California. What Apple does in developing countries is have low-skilled jobs, they need people to do, not particularly skilled people. So none of the skills or money they talk about that means you can set up business work. And also, it is not true that developing countries can then develop because of the other things Raquel talked about, where they pollute your waters, they ensure you can't grow and farm them. So none of the kinds of business like agriculture, people could set up whatever exists. If you're polluting the land people work on, you're not giving them skills or money to set their own business, you beg to choose first.
I think our speaker right now, the final speaker,
I think what government bench hasn't understood so far is that Fabian didn't try to tell you that we need all those development goods and we don't need all those development services just because a lot of countries currently in the development stage have already opted into this way and would not meet the threshold of demand of the people that they have right now if those things would be to move away from them. There's a couple of things I'm going to do in this speech. The first one is a small bit of framework, which will be integrated in the rest of the speech, on why this matters and why this matters mostly in the status quo and why it won't work in that same status quo. Then a rebuttal of the gov bench integrated as a whole, and then why our extensions matter most in this debate. So the first thing is a little bit of framing. Had this debate happened 300 years ago, where we would say maybe globalization, maybe not, fair. I think that would have worked. Had this debate happened only in the Western world, then yes, for a lot of those people, it would have worked. Still would not be mutually exclusive, but would have. But the way we're defending this is globally and in the status quo. That is a status quo in which Cairo has shifted into an industrial process and now needs to demand millions and millions of people into food, of which most of which, or in India, in Bangalore, in which there are millions of people, most of which working in a factory, in which even a 10% drop from the Nike stocks because people now buy locally means that factory closes and those people are on the street. Notice that India hasn't developed that much yet, that their local producers can produce the same amount for the same amount of money, or can produce the same amount of goods, and if they don't have import products, to meet the demands of those millions of people, because they are now literally dependent in those countries on the import. Yes, sometimes that's not the best thing, but that is the status quo, and that is the people that we also need to defend today. Even if their arguments are true, even if climate change every debate-winning argument is happening partly because of those things. Even if workers' rights are partly, the bad workers' rights are partly due to capitalism, we say that is not mutually exclusive. What is mutually exclusive on our side is that those are the people that first will be jobless the moment those markets shrink, and that those are the people that deserve our defense today. So a rebuttal of OG, or from the government side as a whole. So a couple of things they say make quite some sense. Yes, climate change is partly because we ship, for example, bananas from South America to the Netherlands. But the thing is that the problem isn't in the shipping itself, the problem is in the way that we ship it, which is by plane. By the way, planes only a very marginal thing of climate change today. A larger part of climate change today is, for example, the meat consumption. If we buy a lot of meat locally, into such an extent, because there's 50 million people living in the small piece of the Netherlands and we still have those mega stores, climate change is still happening and that's still a bad thing. Currently, technology, for example, because the markets are so demanding, because we have a globalized world, because media is saying, look what those people do, because public image to companies is being part of the imperfect market, and public image is an important part of selling today, there are technologies that are promoting maybe new kinds of way of shipping, that are making new kinds of motors and ship it by boat, for example, in order to make it more productive and less environmentally challenging. Because for a company nowadays, also for an international, even for companies like Shell, it's a good thing to say that you're globally sustainable. Those are also alternatives. You don't save climate change purely by not shipping things anymore, especially when they try to squirrel out of the motion that you will still have Coca-Cola somehow in Africa, even though you can't ship things anymore. That is not, like, if that's true, then all their points fall because their benefits are marginal. So we say that's not true, we buy their points, but we say there's also a lot of other alternatives that points are true. Similar for workers' rights. Like, we also think that we now are encouraged not to buy at H&M anymore, given the fact that this motion says you should mostly buy produced goods. We're not saying you just shouldn't buy at H&M anymore, we say you should mostly buy at other things. Currently, we say just don't buy at the companies that do really bad things into workers' rights, stimulating those companies to actually do something about those workers' rights in India. Given the fact, again, that those kind of companies also sustain a lot of people in India, but under horrible conditions. Not necessarily related immediately to the fact that they just have that demand and we're shipping it from them, but because India itself also doesn't have the system to defend itself. And we are now trying to create a promote a system that says H&M try to do a better job there. Once again, not mutually exclusive under their side. So what is mutually exclusive under our side, and why does that lead them? Fabian tells you a couple of things. Mostly that's related to the framing in which we say, in which opening forgets, in which we say, look, currently community is great. Buying in your community is great, especially when you are a local producer. But you cannot be a competitive local producer. You cannot be competitive in which they say, yeah, but you're now not gonna go into capitalism, you're not gonna promote people to buy things. If you don't do that, you become a monopoly, you can still screw over workers' rights. We say you want to be competitive, but in order to be a large part of that competitiveness is a larger market. At the point where we say we take away this competitiveness and we want to buy locally in the West, that means the first markets that are going to shrink are the ones demanding the basic goods, or the ones that you can most easily lose out of. Those are the ones that technology that's produced, for example, abroad. That is saying, if we don't buy Apple products anymore, or Apple produced phones, because they're produced abroad and we say those workers' rights are bad and we give them all the benefits, that means a lot of people in Sierra Leone lose out from their job or from the things they're doing, even though they're mining under horrible circumstances. I also don't agree with those circumstances, but the problem is they have already opted into that industrial capitalist society. The moment Sierra Leone becomes largely jobless with those people means it's the moment that they need to start producing their own goods and their own food. Problem is, because this is in the status quo, they never really focused on the development of becoming a better agricultural society. That's only possible as long as we keep investing, and the best people who can provide services in order to develop, for example, people in Sierra Leone are, for example, from abroad, from Europe, who are currently doing that. It just takes time to shift that. But currently, that's not happening. So currently, if we screw over people in Sierra Leone because we don't have this global market anymore, which is Fabian explained to you, they are jobless, but also when they go home and they try to produce their own food, they'll never make enough food to sustain their entire country, because a lot of those countries already have a large population boom, because they went to cities, because capitalization and globalization already happened. That's a thing that you can't deny under their side. I love the idea that everyone is living in a happy small community and eats from their local farmer, but the truth is that a lot of countries don't have the technology to sustain the amount of people they need to sustain if they want to live from the global farmer. We have that because we can overproduce, because we have been developed, because we have that industrial society. A lot of countries who are completely remoted might also have this because they don't have the amount of people to sustain. But a very, very large part of the world is living in an intermediate society which is shifting towards globalized industrial society, which is now currently working in lower known things, which has a lot of people, which now is removed from that market or is the first one to lose from these kind of markets. Those are the people we lose out on. Those are the people who won't have food anymore in the future if they don't import it or if they don't have a job to buy those foods anymore. Those are the people who might die from hunger. Those are the people we're defending today. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, speakers, we cross the floor, shake hands, and